Welcome to Stepping Up, Becoming a Leader in Your Team. I am Jason, as mentioned. I come from Ottawa, Canada. So you might hear a little bit of that Canadian accent coming through. One of the things that I like to do as part of this talk is talk about all of the failures that I have done as a person who has tried to do this multiple times. So I'm here to talk to you about what did I do wrong so that you won't have to make the same types of mistakes and maybe learn something from what I've done. Uh, what I want to talk about is that there's an awkward moment when you're that member of the team and then suddenly you go to leading the team. And you first make this transition and it feels a little strange, but somebody saw something in you. You're really good at working up and down the chain, or maybe you can collect teams from different departments together, or you're good at project, whatever it is. Somebody saw that you have it, and now they want you to take this on. This leadership quality is great, but it's awkward when all of a sudden your teammates are calling you boss and you're in charge of their performance reviews. And it can be hard when you're transitioning to let go of all that stuff you used to be doing, because strategic work is a very different type of work. Like you might be used to you take your task, you get it done. And now you're doing this stuff that takes quarters or years before you see success from them. So we'll talk about some of those times. And I've done this transition a couple of times now where I've been in a team and then started leading it. And I'll go over 4 main areas today. First, talking about delegation. How do you balance out all that independent stuff you're used to doing with now this new manager role? And then also, how do we switch our mindset? Go away from being a subject matter expert to more of a coach, a behind the scenes. And then there's the fun part of middle management, which is being stuck in the middle. And we'll get into that. And then finally, an important section on mental health, how to prevent burnout, just a few tips and stuff from this type of a transition. Now, you may have noticed a little bit of a theme with these pictures. A lot of toys. I have 3 daughters, wonderful kids, very young, and I play with them a lot. And we use stories to try to teach and have something resonate, because stories have this emotional connection. It allows us to easily recall something. So if you're, say, a Star Wars fan, if I said, let the Wookiee win, you'd kind of be transported back in time to that point in that movie. You know what I'm talking about. That's what we're looking for. How do we take the stories of what we've done and find those recall moments, the points where something important was learned, so that we remember and can go back to that? And you're making your own stories out there, just like I have. And hopefully we can find a way to bring those stories together and create those learning moments. Now, the first challenge I mentioned I wanted to talk about was something I've talked to a lot of managers and colleagues about, and this whole delegation business, right? When you are an independent contributor, stuff gets brought to you and you get it done. Now that you go into being a manager, now you have to find a way to take things and bring them to other people. And it can be hard when you're used to being inside the team to start transitioning stuff to other people. And I know this was hard for me. When I first became a manager, my very first time, I was at a small product team. I started leading the R&D group. And it was a small team, but it was great people, loved it there. But I was doing a lot of development work when I was supposed to be managing the team. And I didn't know it at the time. It took some time removed from the position before I was able to look at it and go, oh, I guess I kind of gave myself some choices, right? I could, one, throw away a decade of experience doing what I did, everything I was good at, and then try to figure out this new job. Or I could kind of do some of the other stuff that I knew and then not really do the new job great. Or, and this is the one I went with, let's completely do the old job I was doing and then also pour myself into learning this new management role and doing it really well. That seemed like the win-win option, right? And I learned a lot. I learned about SWOT analysis. I learned about product management, release management, all kinds of stuff. I also learned how to burn out in under a year, which was not fun. It was super tough for me when I made that transition to give away all that stuff that I was doing. I mean, I knew I could do them, and it was going to take me a bunch of effort to get somebody else to learn it. But not only that, now as the manager of the team, I can see what everybody else is working on. So if I'm giving my stuff down, that means something on their plate has to drop. And I don't want that. So that wasn't what I wanted. How was I going to handle that? So the approach I chose seemed to work well for a while, but ultimately it didn't work for me, and I wasn't able to handle it, and I burnt out and I left that job. So guess what happened? My task got picked up by other people on the team, and they did fine. They prioritized, they figured it out. The only person in the room who was having a problem with it was me. So that was a learning moment that I came from, that this can always get done, and people will always get the highest priority stuff will get done next. So that was a key piece that I had to learn. And I've repeated this scenario a few times, and I've never done it perfectly. Like even this last time when I became went up from being a developer advocate to then a developer advocacy lead, I was still uploading videos to YouTube and things like that, like for years without, like, that was a task that easily should have been done by somebody else. I knew that I had to get better at looking at tasks. What type of tasks are they? OKRs, things like that, that are looking at the whole team, strategy. Those are clear. I could figure out that that's stuff that I should be having on my plate. Things that literally anybody could do with a little instruction and some access, those are easy. Get those onto somebody else's plate. Those don't need to be on mine. The hard one, though, is the learned expertise. That's stuff that maybe I'm the only one who knows how to do it, or it would take a really long time for somebody to be able to learn how to do this. There's a huge investment there to get someone to take that on, and it can be hard to give those stuff away. Now, I mentioned over here in the slide that the concept of the sleigh, right? So somebody's got the reins, somebody's pulling. In that metaphor, you've got a team that's working really hard to get the sled to move, and you need that. And then you have to have a driver who's looking at what are the obstacles in the way. Are we going in the right direction? And try keeping us on course. And you need both. And it's really hard to effectively do both at the same time. So you need the whole team to be able to get where you need to go. So what I learned from this, first of all, I shouldn't do two jobs at once. That doesn't work for me mental health wise. So avoiding that. But what I learned was that I needed to share. I needed to stop blocking the team from growing. They could probably do this better than me if I gave them the opportunity. And that was one of the roles as a manager, is how do I give opportunities to other people so that they can succeed? My role was not to try to get it done. And also, even when I was trying to get it done, I'm the blocker, and I've got other pulls on my time too. And so that's no good for the team anyway. So I had to learn to trust my team. I had to learn to be able to say, okay, this is not what I should be doing. Let's get the right people on it so that the right work goes to the right people at the right time. Now, the next section, which I found really hard, was turning off the expert mode. There's this whole, like, you build up this years of experience, you're really good at something, and then you become a manager either for the first or second time, and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And for me, I was used to working in a mode where I knew what I was doing. I built up years of experience doing it. And suddenly now I didn't know, how do I do this next piece? How do I do this new task? I'm starting to learn all over again. And so you have a confidence issue there. And a lot of the skill sets that you use to become a great independent contributor can translate a little, but I felt it was almost a little bit like imposter syndrome. And along with that, how do I get my team to trust I'm going to make the right decisions? How do I get them buy-in? How do I get them involved in this? How are they going to look at me and say, yeah, this is going to work, right? When I clearly don't know what I'm doing. Now, my teammates may have never actually felt this, but that's how I felt going into that transition, making that change. So I eventually learned from others how to get some of this done. And one of them was the concept of an early win. Now, this actually works whenever you're doing work for a customer or working on any project. Have something where your new team in the new model succeeds. It doesn't matter how big it is. It can be small. But the model is, if you win early, then that becomes the normal. And then when something wrong happens later, that becomes the thing that's unusual because everyone in their mind is already set, like, of course this is going to work. That must have been the aberration. So that was a tip that was given to me. Second, and this was hard for me at first, was how to be more empathetic and think about the other members of the team. Because often as an independent contributor, you're focused in on how do you do well? How do you succeed in your career? And now I have to think more about how do I make them succeed? What are their challenges? And by doing that and having the conversations, that helps them trust you more because you have a better idea of what they're going through. But in that first, I think the one that helped the most was honesty. And we talked about this just before the call was how do we be more honest, more transparent? How does that build trust? Saying things like, this is going to be new for me. I'm going to need your help along the way as we adjust to this new model, right? Things like that, where you're being open about the fact that maybe there's going to be some bumps along the way. And that helps build that trust. Now, one other thing that's in this kind of area that I encountered was the concept of being able to know what people are coming to you for. I'm used to, as an independent contributor, as an expert in something, being the subject matter expert. And someone comes to me and they want my expertise. And I was on a call, I was last year, maybe 2 years ago. One of my reports came to me. They asked a question and I went into expert mode right away. I went, okay, here are all the options we could go with. Here's the pros and cons. And I'm going through all this stuff. And they thankfully stopped me and said, Jason, I know about the options. I already have put together a plan. I've gone through that step. What I need to know is, can you support this plan? Do you see any issues with us bringing this to upper management? That type of thing, right? And like, this is a light bulb moment for me at this point that I was totally coming at this the wrong way. I was not identifying what someone was coming to me. I was used to being the expert. Now I've got the expert coming to me who's looking for me for the stuff I have access to as a manager, the stuff that's outside our team, and trying to get me to buy in. But sometimes, because I've been an expert, people will come to me and they do want my expertise because I've done something a lot of times and they're trying to have me mentor them through it. So one of the things I had to learn was, how do I situationally figure out? And sometimes the easiest way is just to ask the question, like, hey, what kind of feedback are you looking for on this? That'd be one way to try to do it, to try to determine what's the situation here, right? Which hat do I have to put on? And all of this, what it came down to was a lot of listening. And I know everybody talks about, you got to listen more and like really listen, deep listening, all this stuff. But it's really key to being able to know which part of you needs to come to the table. And how do you build trust? How do you connect with the team and switch the focus? Because it's not about you anymore. Now it's about them. How do you make them the focus of everything you're working on? Now, I'm not going to say I'm an expert at this day to day. I still have to work at this. But if we get better and better at being able to say, I have expertise in this area, but what do you think? And that allows us to just build up a better team, connect a little bit better, transition a little more into that leadership side. Now, the next topic I wanted to touch on was the fun part of middle management. Oh, when you take that step up and you first see just how many directions can pull you at once. You also get your own team pushing up at you with different requests, and they need stuff from you. Your management needs stuff done. You've got other teams in the organization. They're coming in at you. And sometimes you manage to juggle it all and it seems like it's good. But then all of a sudden, it all comes in at once. And now you got to start pushing back, and that can be tough. There was one time several years ago, I was at an implementation agency, essentially working as a team lead of groups that delivered projects for customers. It was probably the most extreme scenario I had of being pushed in on all angles where there was, a high risk in it. I definitely was not paying enough time to pay attention to what my team needed. Because my team was struggling with the project. And this project was not going well. Like, if something could go wrong, it went wrong. And if we had a timeline, it's out the window. It's not going to happen. So I was looking at it and we're too late now. I'm going to my team and they're like, we need more time. Like the timeline has to change. We can't get it done. But the customer had these real world dates that couldn't move. There was nothing we could do about it. It was out of their control. So it's not like they could just say, yeah, go do a new date. And that wasn't going to happen. Go to my management. And they're like, no. Budget is fixed. We cannot afford any more people, any more time on this. I could not, like, if you're familiar with the concept of the iron triangle of resource management, it was, definitely the most strict iron triangle I'd been stuck in. But I'm in problem solving mode. So I sit down. I'm like, how do we do this? How do we overlap? How do we do parallel? I figure something out. I pitch a plan. And everybody's like, okay, that could work. And then, of course, everything goes wrong again. I should have predicted that given how everything had gone so far. But we did it. We did it by having the team pull a ridiculous amount of overtime, super high stress. We got out the door, big celebration, and then the whole thing kind of starts unraveling because now we're over budget. So my management's not happy and the customer's not happy because one of them's going to have to pay for it. And the customer was stressed out the whole time, not sure we were going to make the deadlines. It was like, down to the wire. They're not happy about this situation. And my team, I've just made them do weeks and weeks of really stressful, high risk, lots of work. They are not happy. So we go into this massive retrospective of what goes wrong and what went wrong. And there was a lot, right? We filled a whole wall. But the one thing that I took out of all of that was at no point in that entire process did I say, nah, it's not happening. I never at one, I was always in, how do we make it happen? Which was great from a problem solving perspective, but not great from a leadership perspective. I didn't stand up for my team and I regret that. And another example of when you get into this pressure of like balancing different things is loyalties to different people. You've probably heard the phrase, HR is not your friend. And apologies if you have any HR professionals listening or people in people orgs. This is not just HR that's about, right? In general, at larger companies, processes are designed for managers and leaders to protect and enhance the company. That's their goal. It's not about the individual. Sometimes these processes align, and what's good for the company is good for the individual. Some examples could be managers getting software for your team. For example, you might have to go through a procurement process to, evaluate different vendors, that type of thing. Or you might be hiring a contractor. There might be a specific way you do SOWs to protect everything legally. You could be acquiring another company, and then certain people of leadership are pulled into that, and there's certain things you can talk about and certain things you can't. There's certain rules around that. The one that's hardest for me is always having to let somebody go. And when it comes to saying goodbye to a team member, this is really a case where the process is not your friend. Now, there are tons of great management people out there, tons of great HR people who work to advocate for employees all the time. But if you look at the role of what an HR system is, it's about the people around the company. It's not about an individual necessarily. So it becomes a tough situation when you're looking at letting someone go, because that's about the individual. There's emotions, there's careers get involved, and you, as the now middle manager, are between the corporate process and your team member. So this becomes a difficult situation for you. Now, if you've got a good people team, they probably got things like FAQs and guides, maybe even a script to help you with this, so you know what to say. Sometimes you may even be told to not deviate from a script because there's very specific wording that's been picked, because there might be legal issues, or you're supposed to have minimum information shared, or you're just supposed to, in general, control the situation from an emotional perspective. Now, when you're a people leader, if you act like I am, I have that instinctual reaction to reject that, because I'm trying to listen. I'm trying to be empathetic. I'm trying to do what's right for my team member. And reading some robotic script doesn't align with that. So now I'm feeling this pressure of like, who do I listen to? Because I have a responsibility to my employer. I need to respect that. I have responsibility to the continuation of the rest of the team. but I've also got responsibility to my team member. And the tricky part is balancing both. I think if you are put in this situation, my advice would be to push back and do what's right for your employee. Now, not everybody's in a situation where you can push back, and maybe those are times when you can remember, like the little tagline here, the process is not your friend. Sometimes doing what's good for the company is not going to be what's good for that individual. And for me, in this situation, that's where I have to make a call of how much do I follow my instinct? How much do I follow the process? Are there things that I can do to change it up, kind of play both sides? Are there ways that I can personalize the message to acknowledge the connection that we've had as a team member? Are there ways that I can help? Maybe there's a way I can help them find their next position using my network. How do I capture the right tone? How do I give them the feeling that this matters? And all the while, this is really hard. Like, how much do you push back? Like, you probably shouldn't go and blast your company on Twitter, for example. Like, there's certain lines you shouldn't cross. So you have to show respect to your organization. But I think in the end, remember, careers are really long. You're going to work with other people. Your reputation follows you. So I think the Agile Manifesto got it right here. People over processes. And all of this comes back to, from these different scenarios, like punching up. Like, my role as a leader is to say no, to push for my team, because every time I tried to make everybody happy at the expense of my team, it never worked, backfired on me. So how do I make sure that I am pushing back and doing what's necessary so that my team is as strong as possible? But that's hard too, because like I'm a people pleaser. I am one of those individuals who I really want to help you. I want to be helpful. I want to see you succeed, and saying no to you is hard. I have found it is easier when you're doing it upwards rather than going down or sideways. So if you can hold those no's for things coming from on top, that can be helpful. But sometimes saying no doesn't work. We've all been there where you push back and you're told, do it anyway. And that's tough, but at least you can hold on to that you did your best. You fought for what you believed in and you did everything you could. Now, the last section that I want to talk to is really important to me, and this is around mental health. It can be really tough when you make this transition to balance everything out and avoid burnout. I think that people in the position of being in a team and then immediately leading that team have a lot of pressures and pulls on them that can put us in an awkward position. Now, there's a billion things out there about work-life balance and how do you do self-care, all that stuff. I don't want to rehash all of that, but I want to pull out a few things that I think were important or elements that you can watch out for. One of them is whether or not you are balancing everything on your plate properly. I talked about earlier when I was the product R&D lead and I didn't transition my work and burnt out in under a year. I was not doing well mental health wise. I certainly felt like I had been going full out way too much for that time. And at one point I leave, and my thought process out there was that I'm not right for management. I'm not like these other people who are up here doing, they all seem to be doing great. Must be something about me. I should go do something else that's not management. So when I went and got that next job, I went and got something that was supposed to be more technical, more, in the trench, like more task oriented. And then within a few months, I was suggesting process changes, leading groups, trying to get into tiger teams. Like, I couldn't help myself. Like, that's what I wanted to do. And suddenly I realized it doesn't feel the same. I'm not feeling the same pressure I was before. So what was different? The difference was when I went into this new position, I now had control over my expectations because there were no expectations on me. And the difficulty I had in the previous position, it didn't matter whether I was a fit for management or not. The fact of the matter is, I didn't transition out of my old role. So a key piece here is to look for that. Are you transitioning? Because if you don't transition, you can get stuck trying to do too much. And on that topic of like going and doing too much, it's not just about doing too much work. It can also be about when life starts getting too much. So a couple years back, well, it's been almost 3 years now, since March 2020. A lot of people have been having challenging times, and it takes a toll. Now, for me, before the pandemic hit, I was a remote worker, globally distributed team. My work didn't seem to really change. If anything, like I couldn't do events anymore and travel like that. So it was getting either easier, but I felt like I was hitting a limit. Why is this happening? So I started to recognize some of those burnout feelings. And what didn't occur to me was I wasn't balancing life into my equation. I was trying to avoid the problem I had before, that I had too much work. So I was looking at my work tasks. Am I balancing my work tasks properly? It didn't occur to me that life needed more from me and that I actually had to reduce how much I was doing at work. So that was one thing that kind of pulls on you. And another element is when you lose a loved one. Now, in July of 2019, my mother-in-law, Pat, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And for 2 years, like we were trying to do everything we could every day just to make the best out of every day. And then in summer 2021, things got really bad. And my family really needed me, not just during off hours, like all the time. We had to, like, it was hard to say, like, there's these great projects. I'm not going to be a part of it. But it was also hard to keep a straight face and pretend like quarterly reports mattered at all to me right now. It didn't seem important. And I realized that part of what I needed to do was to be able to step away and do that. And then it occurred to me that my management was letting me do this. They recognized something that maybe I hadn't done up till then, was when you give your teammates space to do what they need to in their life, you're going to be able to get them back better. And if you try to push them through it, it ultimately isn't going to work. So I recognized from that what I needed in that time was what my management gave me. And how was I going to bring that to my team? How was I going to ask the right questions to know how they're doing? How was I going to be able to support them when something went wrong for them? How do I give them that space so that I give them what they need for their mental health? Because it's a heavy burden to carry when you have loss. And sometimes you need help. And sometimes as a manager, you're going to be that help for someone else. You're going to be able to make them get through it. And all of this came down to balancing everything, having to look at the whole look and seeing what goes right. Sometimes that's about doing less. Sometimes it's about doing the right thing. Different work tasks have different stress levels. So maybe there's something fun you could do. Maybe there's certain tasks that are easier for you to do and they kind of give you a break. You also want to look for recharge moments. Things like I play Xbox for like 30 minutes or whatever, and it just kind of helps me get into a different headspace. And those types of things. Maybe for you, it's learning a new code piece or being able to jump in and make a fun video on TikTok or something like that. Whatever it does it for you. Find those recharge moments. Those help with balancing. Sometimes it's taking away, sometimes it's adding. Now, over the course of this session, went through a bunch of stuff. Mainly these 4 topics. We talked about how do we let things go and share it with the team? How do we listen more and know that it's not about our expertise? It's more about the team now. We got to be in that coach mode. Talked also about pushing back, being able to protect your team and fight for them. And also, how do we balance things? Because we need to be there for the long run. Now, there's a bunch of stuff, obviously, I didn't get into today, and you've got a bunch of stuff that's on your plate too. But thank you so much for spending the time here. I know you've got this. I want you to connect over on jasonstcyr.com. You can find links to all my socials like Twitter, Mastodon, all that stuff. Connect with me. I want to know what you're going through. I want to know what challenges you're seeing. How did you solve it? Because for me, I'm on a continuous learning path. I want to always be learning out and getting better at this. So I want to hear from you. So thank you very much for your time.